questions. Mr. Otto?
I'll answer that. There will be no shenanigans for me. I have stated my stance in opposition since 2017 when the subject first came up, so that's where I'm still at.
And Glenn, what is that stance?
I am not in favor.
It really is. Mayor, I appreciate you bringing it up, but that's where I'm at. I think we should just take it to a third reading and vote on it. And the vote comes out to where it is. I think this mentality of having a kumbaya and holding hands and roasting some s'mores and hot dogs, that's just ridiculous and uncalled for. But I understand Mr. Morgan's comments and not throwing you underneath the bus. I think we're here to govern, and sometimes we're not going to vote the same way. But I think it's important for this community to see that. I think it's healthy.
I will restate what I've said in previous meetings. If it's not this council at this time, it won't happen. Right now we have 3 of the 4 positions that would be open in November unchallenged. I look at this as an opportunity to take the politics out of this decision and make a decision that's good for the future of the council and the city.
Go back down.
It's pertinent to
yes, okay.
comment, if you don't mind. Since it's been mentioned a couple of times, the number 0, I just want to put it out that I've never proposed that as a number to be put into place. My comments have been that if you want to round number, 0's round. I don't care. I don't care about this salary. I just wanted to clarify that that's not been a proposal of mine to take everybody to 0.
No,
fair enough.
I was just assuming that
I know.
the number you wanted.
Put out a couple of times, and I think that's what Mr. Lyons was alluding to earlier as well. He wanted that on record, I believe. So there's the 0 comment.
Okay.
I was going to be short and sweet, but apparently that's not what we're doing. Mr. Shaw, I think you did the best northern version of a bless your heart, maybe ever. No disrespect, Mr. Morgan, but your proposal's ridiculous. But no disrespect.
There yet, do some soul searching just for the fact that it needs to be done for the betterment of the city. Whether or not we, quote unquote, reap those benefits shouldn't matter to us. It should be more about exactly what Councilman Webb said, the possibility of whoever may replace us in the future. Somebody who would be great for the city, but at this time couldn't make that leap. So, yes, that's all I have to say.
Take all the comment and input. Like Richard, I haven't been contacted in any manner, positive or negative, about the issue.
And I think each and every one of us came on this council knowing what we were going to make. In fact, I didn't even know we were going to make anything when I was appointed. Every expense that we have is paid for. And for the newest people on this council, I have a real hard time understanding how you could even address a raise, because that's just simply because our neighbors got it. I came here knowing exactly what we were going to make. Our expenses are paid, so why are we even having this conversation?
I do not mean this to be in any way a slam towards prior council people who I feel have done an excellent job. And if you look at my record of service at 0 pay over the couple of decades that I've been around here, nonetheless, the cost for a person to be a council member have gone up in the past 30 years. And because of that, I do think that it's a deterrent to talent coming out for these positions.
And as the discussion for council compensation came to a close, it ended like this.
It's not a matter of whether you want it or whether you need it. It's a matter of whether it covers our expenses. That's what it is. And
I think you'd be able to give back the money that didn't.
Is that a matter of giving back the money?
Well, you raised that situation. You raised that. So if you're keeping track of if you're keeping track, you're the one who said that your expenses are covered. So if your expenses are covered up to the point of that, if that's what your argument is, then you could give that money back to the city.
Who on this council's expenses are not covered?
Well, I think it depends on whatever kind of expenses you're talking about. If your opinion,
I would say that I have a lot covered, but I don't mind.
and that'd certainly be your prerogative to give that money back to the
Other
city.
than time, yeah, I've funded my own trips to Washington, D.C.
I thought you said another organization funded that.
I funded my own as well. I take a lot of trips around the state of Ohio that I pay for completely out of my pocket. I do a lot of things throughout the community that I pay for out of pocket.
So what's the difference?
I don't care about that. That doesn't concern me. I just as to the question, yes, I do spend money out of pocket.
Right, but you could get reimbursement.
I could. I don't find it necessary.
Well, I understand,
Right.
but I'm just saying.
Right. I could. Yeah, if I needed to be refunded or reimbursed for a lot of that stuff, Tony's offered a lot of those things before.
And that's the whole point right here, that there's nothing we're doing that we can't be reimbursed for. And in the interest of time, we're not going to come to a conclusion tonight. Nope. We got one more agenda item.
I'm not the one that keeps raising it, so.
If you want to listen to that conversation, it's an hour-long debate, conversation, discussion on council compensation. This would be the point where I play the song Kumbaya, because that was mentioned earlier, that and s'mores and a number of other issues came up during that conversation. Does anyone get the impression that Mr. Lyons is at a party that the rest of us aren't invited to? There's just no reason to make the clerk of council collect all the comments that have been made on the dais, unless you're trying to use that against another counselor. One thing that gets brought up in each time we hear this discussion is the PERS, or the OPERS. Simply put, that is the Ohio Public Employees Retirement System. At $660, you qualify to be a part of that system. When council's raising the pay, that helps them be a part of that system. Okay, another thing that was brought up quite a bit is the 6-2 vote. 6-2 vote. Why so adamant? That would be a question to ask. Why so adamant about having council work together on this issue and only this issue? Because it's council compensation, or is there another reason? A 6-2 vote would pass this piece of legislation. Council would get a raise next year because there's an election this year. So that set of council members would get a raise next year, 2020. If an item is passed beyond the 2/3 majority, the mayor can veto. Do you see the mayor vetoing his own proposal? No, he's not going to veto it. So if this piece of legislation passes, and we read 4.10 for council compensation, nothing in there says that a 6-2 vote or a 5-5 vote or even a 4-4 vote. If it's 4-4, guess who decides? Guess who's the decider? If it's a tie vote, the mayor decides. He's not going to veto, and he's not going to not vote for his own proposal. We know that. He even at the end of this discussion was arguing. I don't know, it was a little childish. We could play it again, but it wasn't me. It's like your kids fighting with each other, and they're arguing. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. I didn't bring it up. You brought it up. It wasn't me. So, yeah. I thought it was quite interesting. Moving on, we come to item P, Lexington Place TIF District. That discussion, that agenda item began like this.
The next item up is item 3P, which is the Lexington Place TIF District. I will remove myself from this conversation, and
what?
Vice Chair Mr. Morgan can administer this particular agenda item.
Where'd that idea come from?
Thank you, Mayor.
Morgan, I'll hand the gavel to you, sir, or you could come here because this is the last item. So I would just assume you come here and you adjourn the meeting.
There's an executive session.
Okay. Adjourn to an executive session. and I'll just be waiting on the rest of you.
If it's okay, Mayor, I'll just do it from here.
Okay.
I don't know if I can fill that seat very well. Council, you heard there's an executive session, so dare I ask. Mr. Schomer, would you be willing to give us an update on what we're discussing here, please?
This is important.
Briefly, we had discussed the Lexington Place TIF. I revealed to council last week, or last meeting, last work session, the estimated projected availability of bond service or debt service for debt is about $1.6 million. Principal available for debt based on what the TIF would generate. That doesn't meet the estimate of what would be $4 million to do the road improvements. We have had follow-up conversations with the school. The school administration reached out to us right after that meeting and scheduled a meeting to come in and discuss because we had additional discussions not only about the TIF but also the pilot payment. That was kind of an additional discussion with this as well. I met with the incoming superintendent and also Mrs. Gunnell and Mrs. Helmlich for the school treasurer, along with some staff members. So we discussed that in follow-up as we were asked to do. Regarding the TIF itself, nothing has changed other than whether we want to identify a project that matches $1.6 million and where we want to go with that. Regarding the pilot payment, I would strongly suggest that if we continue forward with that, as it is already budgeted for this year, and also the school has budgeted for that as well for their current fiscal year, and they are coming up on their fiscal year, that we move forward with an agreement to that as opposed to just a resolution that infers an agreement. I think that we should develop and structure an agreement that everybody would be able to sit down and review and agree to and vet for the purpose of continuing that. Other than that, regarding the TIF, we really need to make a decision if it is something that we want to move forward with and do with a residential improvement district. It's not just an overlay of a TIF like a commercial area that would contribute to our Montgomery County TIF. This is project specific, has a separate set of procedures that are involved, and although that we want to identify the Chambersburg Road improvements, we can still utilize that as a project. However, we're going to have to wait until additional funds are gathered, whether it be through a MVRPC Issue 2 funding. Once we're done with one side of Chambersburg, we can move on to the other, in addition to utilizing the TIF funds for the match for that. There's a whole variety of options. So,
creative financing.
The additional point with that, with the school administration discussing the pilot payment last week, their board actually is interested in meeting sooner than later. They had asked, and both myself and the superintendent has agreed to come back to our respective boards and pass that message on. I passed on our opinion that awaiting till the new superintendent was onboarded. However, he was in attendance in the meeting. He said he'd make himself available and agreed that his board is anxious to get together with this board, and I'm passing that message on.
Mr. Schomer,
this is funny.
Let me recap where I think we left off and what we just gave an update on, because I'm a little confused, and I'm guessing other council members might be as well. The question at hand was, do we proceed with a TIF district for Lexington Place that included the schools or did not include the schools, correct? And I think we heard from Mr. McDonald last meeting that we could do both. In other words, we could start and switch if the schools became more agreeable than they have been. And then that conversation proceeded into a conversation about holding back on the pilot payment that is not due to them, which apparently then, or arguably we can hold back on because it's discretionary, which apparently led then to a hastily called meeting by the school administration with you.
That's correct.
Which is fortunate. That's nice. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question before I open it up to the council is, help me understand why we would not proceed with, well, two questions. One, was there any conversation from the school about working with us on the TIF? Second, outside of the pilot payment conversation.
Good question.
Second,